EMP coming out. Photon emission on the other hand. This can be very lucky or very unlucky. I go for photon emission. I think... Okay, I was wrong. I thought the opponent was going for the supply module, which has been nerfed quite a bit. Well, nerfed? Changed is probably more like it. But the buff it got in that it boosts unit stats by 20%, I don't think that's worth the cost of it. I think it is now probably nerfed. I do end up dropping some additional Mustangs. And he drops the fire. He also drops photon right here in the middle, which makes perfect sense. And he does purchase his oil bomb from the tower and throw it here. Meanwhile, I also purchase a sticky oil bomb and try to connect it like here. And do I throw that at the very front here? I think I do. Yeah, exactly. I know how my opponents think. They see oil, they have Stormcrawlers. Fire is the logical next step. I would be surprised if he does not do that. He also starts buying out now. Gets all of the upgrades and rapid resupply, so he will be down 250 in eco next round. I do drop an additional shield here. I had money for only one shield and didn't want to buy out. And it turns out I guessed the wrong side. Would have been real amazing if I guessed the right side. Why did I expect it? I know there was no shield here. Now, unfortunately, my opponent does have additional Stormcrawlers here, so they ignite all of this pretty swiftly. And that means everything on this side is officially gone. Meanwhile, on the other side, I am feeling the lack of chaff. Tower falls. Basically, it feels like half of the map is on fire. And for Mustangs that are not yet at level 5 or 6, that is a very bad place to be in. My opponent cleans up my forces and wipes the floor with me. Well, it's not that terrible, because he doesn't really have that much expensive stuff here. I think he invested mostly into cheap units, but upgrades. So I don't take a terrible amount of damage, but it's still very bad. He starts dropping Overlords. I guess maybe to add another problem, but honestly I don't think Overlords are good, because they are not that much of a problem. I do have these Marksmen here already, and I do have Mustangs. He drops a 4th pack of Stormcrawlers, if I'm not missing any. And he drops the repair on tanks, field maintenance. Why? If they get destroyed, it's most likely going to be by the Scorpions. And the Scorpions do not care about your tanks healing up. Like, for real. Why would they be caring? I do sell the Overlord, or I drop the Overlords and do sell one of them. My opponent does not buy out, but he does get the temporary upgrades. And at this point, I really think that War Factory is kind of the only play that I have. Leverage my economy into buying War Factory. I can only drop one for the moment, but I am able to purchase some additional chaff and one War Factory with Missile Interceptor. And I do buy out. It is the round where you should be doing that, in my opinion. And what do I do? Oh yeah, I dropped some Missile Interceptor devices here. And do get my upgrades. My opponent did drop some Fangs here. I'm not sure why exactly, because they won't be distracting all that much relevant, or in all that relevant of a way. The War Factory does end up intercepting basically all the missiles. And I start to have some more luck here, but it's not in range of intercepting the missiles that come into the middle here. So that is actually still some fire on the ground. So there is a pretty scary ball of front Scorpion with War Factory and some level 2 Mustangs rolling in on the right flank. Meanwhile, these anti-missile devices did what they could, but they can't do everything themselves. So they get taken out. And I think that is like 400 bucks that I lost here. That said, the War Factory is pushing in. Basically, this is almost like a ram that I'm throwing at my opponent. The Mustangs, which are faster, are in the front, but there's not all that much taking them out if missiles aren't a thing. And missiles aren't a thing right now. The sledges can be taken out by the War Factory, which means that this actually ends up being a round that I take. The War Factory survives with like 80% health remaining. I even take out my opponent's shield because one of the Stormcrawlers is inside it. And that win was entirely based on this War Factory. That said, I am down a very good amount of eco. An Orbital Javelin comes out, so my opponent can basically point at something and say, "Be gone." It is the round that will most likely decide it. The sides are looking pretty balanced. He still has a little less health, but all in all, I don't think it will matter all that much. I do go for an Orbital Javelin. And my opponent is still thinking, okay, he also goes for the Orbital Javelin. He drops it in this very juicy clump of units. There's no chance that he can take out the War Factory with it. He would need about double the damage. I guess if you ever get into the position of having an Orbital Javelin in one round and another Orbital Javelin in the next round, and you kind of have them synchronized, you can actually take down a level 1 War Factory. But is that really worth it? Your opponent also picks up EMP. He does, that's very important to note, not have launcher overload on his Stormcrawlers. Why is beyond me, because I think that is a tech that you need to have it if you want to use Stormcrawlers in the later stage of the game. You must have it. And if you're not using Stormcrawlers in the later stage of the game, why even go for techs on them at all? So basically this is a absolutely mandatory tech in my opinion. Now fire still lands in the middle. I don't really have the space to put it on the tower. And these anti-missile devices are not enough. But that is looking very scary. A ball of War Factory Mustang is moving in once more. The War Factory is capable of taking the tanks out. They do start to push on the tower unfortunately, but it's not enough. They get taken out beforehand. I guess there also was a Scorpion in the mix here. And in the end, the War Factory Mustang Ball is capable of pushing through. There's a couple more enemy forces left, but let's be honest, they are not going to take that War Factory Mustang Ball out. And it ends up being a win for myself, which I honestly did not expect to win. But this goes back to one thing that I said before, and that is that I absolutely positively don't have War Factories in the back of my head all that much anymore. If you go for this few Stormcrawlers with no launcher overload and you put double tech on them, fire and EMP, you are bound to get punished by War Factory. Honestly. They even buffed the anti-missile on the Mustangs, but I kind of need them for damage and everything else, so I don't really want to push that button. I guess it's really not all that great. I haven't pushed it in ages, it's like. But what would my opponent have done differently? I think the first choice would probably have been not to go for sledges, especially not field maintenance on the sledges, because that doesn't do jack diddly. The only unit that is good against is like the chaff and the Mustangs, and the Scorpions will just take that out. And then I think the Stormcrawler's like, he should right now, right here and now, go and exchange either of any of these techs basically for a launcher overload. Because if he hits that, he actually stands a chance. But without it, I think that's just... You do need some techs in the game. It's unfortunate that some techs are basically required because they are so powerful or so incredibly... You rely on them because there's no way not to rely on them at some point, or not to need them at some point, that you absolutely need them. I think that's true for most range techs and for something like launcher overload on the Stormcrawlers. But that's just, that's the game. That's how the cookie crumbles. You do need some of these techs and you need to equip them on your units. Otherwise, you're going to be in a situation where if a specific board happens that you have and your opponent has, there just is the possibility that your opponent can punish you for something, and you don't have an easy way to get out of that. I mean, he could rely on the Marksman EMP, but the unfortunate part for that is the Mustangs will actually push ahead of the War Factory a bit once enemies in the vicinity have been destroyed, which means that the war factory will start being behind the Mustangs. You could see that they were keeping pretty close, which is because the war factory has less range and tries to get ahead, but the Mustangs are faster, which means as soon as there's space to move up, the Mustangs will catch up to the war factory and probably overtake it fairly swiftly. So I guess maybe Mustang War Factory is an actual unit composition. I don't know. But I could definitely imagine if it is. I guess you need some good single target DPS to back it up. And it's only good for the later rounds, but still, I think it's a decent way to finish this game, which I honestly didn't expect to win that much. So in retrospect, it looks a lot less one-sided than I expected it to. I was just looking at my opponent's Stormcallers and thinking, how can I beat that? Oh yeah, war factories exist. Anyway, thanks for watching and listening, and until next time.